Well, we'll go ahead and get started here. Welcome all. Thank you so much for joining today. We are very excited to be hosting this webinar in our International Education Professional Development Series, Stop the Melt, Strategies for Conversion Management. My name is Emma Sletland. I'm the Marketing Manager for North America at IDP Connect, and I'm thrilled to be your host for today's webinar. We have with us today two experts representing institutions in the US and Canada to discuss an important topic, especially at this time of year, conversion strategies. And just a couple housekeeping items. We encourage you to ask questions throughout the duration of the presentation using the Q&A tool at the bottom of your webinar window, and we will cover these questions at the end. The webinar will be recorded and the recording and slides will be sent to you in a follow-up email. And so with that, I am very pleased to introduce our speakers today. Kimmy Moothart is the Assistant Director of International Admissions and Sponsored Student Programs at Iowa State University. And Lucas Gasell is the Team Lead for International Admissions at the Southern Alberta Institute of Technology. And so I'll just quickly cover our agenda for today's session. I'll briefly introduce IDP and some enhancements to our core partnership related to conversion. Then I'll provide some framing information on conversion trends, benchmarking conversion rates, and best practices. And then I'll hand it over to our institutional experts to discuss how they manage conversion at their institutions. And finally, we'll wrap up with some Q&A from the audience. So starting off, I'll just provide a quick overview of who IDP is and what we do for those who may not be familiar. IDP is a world leader in international education, and we pride ourselves on being trusted experts for the sector. We build these trusted human relationships both with our partner institutions and with the students that we serve. So we do this on a global scale. We place more than 55,000 students annually around the world, and it is through our investment and innovative use of data and digital technology that we have been able to scale and enhance our personal connections. This enables us to deliver global success to more students and institutional partners than ever before. And so just as we guide our students with expert advice to help them find the right institution, we also offer strategic solutions to institutions across three main areas: data and intelligence, marketing, and recruitment. So whether that's providing data and insights to aid in strategic planning, delivering student volumes, diversifying student cohorts, or providing efficiency and quality throughout the funnel, we will work with your institution to deliver tailored solutions. And so I mentioned our global scale. Moving on to the next slide. This includes our physical network of student-facing counseling offices in over 30 countries, which are pictured here in red. We have over 1,600 counselors throughout the world, and we truly are embedded in the markets in which we operate, and students really know and trust the IDP name. Alongside our physical network, we also have the largest digital presence of any international student service provider, receiving over 100 million visits annually to our websites and mobile app. And so we operate 33 student-facing websites across hot courses and idp.com, and this digital presence is pictured here in blue. And so going back to that next slide, I'll just quickly mention some enhancements to our core partnership related to conversion. The core partnership is our premium end-to-end recruitment solution for institutions. And so based on feedback from the sector, we are rolling out some improvements to the core partnership, which are soon to be formally announced. One of these enhancements gives institutions the ability to create custom conversion campaigns that target students at a very granular level down to subject area and study level through email and the app. So core partners, keep an eye out for those enhancements coming soon. And with that, I'll jump into the main content of our presentation. So I'm going to provide a bit of context about what conversion strategies are, why they matter, share some data to benchmark conversion rates, and discuss best practices. So to begin to frame the conversation, I'm going to start off with an image I'm sure you are all very familiar with at this point, and this is the enrollment funnel. And so the word conversion can have different meanings in marketing between different levels of the funnel. For the purposes of today's webinar, when we're talking about conversion or yield, as it is sometimes more commonly referred to in the US, we're talking about that stage from admit to enroll. So the conversion or the yield rate is the percentage of admitted students that actually follow through to enrollment. And in conversations about the funnel and marketing recruitment, we can tend to focus very heavily on the top of the funnel, on things like brand awareness, online presence, lead generation, recruitment fairs, etc. And all of these top of the funnel recruitment activities are very important. You need to be doing all of these things to generate interest, but you also can't forget about the bottom of the funnel. A successful IDM strategy must be comprehensive and include all stages. And especially now when we're seeing really strong rebounding demand for the US and Canada, and many schools are managing large application spikes, conversion strategies are key. It takes a lot of work for your office and a lot of time to get a student to that admit stage. So don't let that effort go to waste by failing to implement conversion strategies and get your students all the way to the finish line. And just one more note here, while today we're primarily going to be talking about what happens after admission, stages earlier in the funnel do have an impact on conversion rate. Things such as qualifying leads so that only qualified students apply and ensuring a smooth application process. So it all works on together, but today we're focusing on that admit to enroll stage. So now that we've discussed the importance of conversion strategies, let's benchmark some average conversion rates. The target conversion rate at your institution will depend on a number of different factors, including your institution type, if you're public, private, specialty, your ranking, your acceptance rate, all of these different factors. But here are some sort of global figures to start to get an idea. According to research from One Step Global, most countries and universities have an average conversion rate between 20 and 25%. NACAC's most recent State of Admissions report shared that the average yield rate in the US for first-time freshmen, and this is including domestic and international, was 34%. That's from 2022. And according to RNL's Recruitment and Yield Benchmarks report from 2019, the average yield rate for first-time international freshmen at private institutions was 17% and 36% at public institutions. So we see here that average yield rates are anywhere from 15 to 40%, and hopefully looking at these numbers gives you an idea of where your institution might fall and what your target conversion rate might be. So next we'll look at some internal IDP student placement data to start to benchmark conversion rates. So all of this data comes from IDP placed students in the US and Canada in the 2022-23 school year. So we see that for both the US and Canada, the average conversion rate for all student segments is 27%. And when we start to break that up into different student segments, there are some interesting findings. In the US, the undergraduate yield rate is significantly lower at 20%, showing that undergraduate students might need a little more support getting to enrollment. Interestingly, for students who heard about the institution through an event, the yield rate increases to 30%. So that's demonstrating the importance of in-person recruitment events. And the conversion rates for diversity markets, which we define as all countries served by IDP, except China and India, drops to 19%. And then looking at China, it drops even further to only 13%. In Canada, the conversion rates tend to be a little more stable between different student segments. The undergraduate conversion rate is actually 2 points higher than the average, And the diversity market conversion rate is very close to the average. For Chinese students studying in Canada, the conversion rate drops to only 7%, which is really interesting. And so looking at these different conversion rates among different student segments can help you to start to understand which audiences are more likely to enroll and which segments might need a little more support getting there. And so finally, I'll wrap up my section here with a quick discussion of conversion strategy best practices. And Kimmy and Lucas are going to get into some more specific examples, but these are general ideas of what works to help get admitted students to that enrollment stage. And the main takeaway here is that your recruitment strategy just needs to continue beyond the admit letter. It can't stop there. So post-admission communication is very important. You need to make sure that students understand their next steps and continue to receive contact, whether that's through call, email, webinar, social media. In my opinion, perhaps the most important element of a good conversion strategy is providing the resources your students need to face the barriers they might have to enrolling. So there are a lot of logistical hurdles that international students need help with, things like getting a visa, finding housing, securing a job. And in a quick shout out to our new Emerging Futures 3 data, which we released last week, 71% of international students said they want help finding a job. So how could you provide that to admitted students before they even arrive? Maybe the Career Center offers services online. The more you can help students to overcome these barriers, the more likely it is that they will enroll. Community building among admitted students is also very important. So the earlier you can connect your students with the campus community, the better. And this can happen online, through social media, or with the help of student ambassadors. And finally, building hype. So make it a big deal, make it really exciting for your admitted students that they got into your university, and they'll be more likely to want to come. This could look like admitted student events in country or online, pre-departure orientations. And if you don't have the resources to do something in country, IDP does pre-departure orientations, so does Education USA. So there are resources. And you could also look at things like sending swag or an admitted student social media campaign. And so I will wrap it up here and hand it over to our speakers to discuss more practical examples of conversion strategies. Over to you, Kimmy.
Thanks, Emma. Hi, everyone. For those of you who may be tuning in a little bit late, my name is Kimmy Muthart. I'm the Assistant Director for International Admissions and Sponsored Programs at Iowa State University. To provide some background about Iowa State, we are a large public research institution in the Midwestern region of the US. We have roughly 30,000 students in total on our campus and almost 2,500 international students from a total of 114 countries around the world. I'm planning to focus mostly on our in-person yield events, which I have on my next slide here. So our big focus this year has been on providing an in-person experience to our admitted students. This spring, we hosted an international admitted student tour where we traveled to over 30 cities and about 19 countries to meet with admitted students specifically. To provide a little bit more context on the students who were invited to these events, it was specifically for undergraduate students. And it was for students who had received their full admission. So students who were conditionally admitted, maybe they hadn't submitted their English proficiency yet, or they didn't meet the English proficiency requirement, were not part of the admitted student tour. So academic seeking students. we, chose to return to a lot of the markets that we had already been investing in for recruitment. Emma kind of touched on this a little bit more. We spend a lot of time getting the students through the application stage, and you do have to continue to work with those students until they matriculate and actually get to your campus. So we find that this is really important, especially because students do tend to apply to so many different schools than they have in the past. So this has been a newer strategy that we have implemented this year. We think that, especially for us, being in Iowa, we are not California, we're not New York, we're not Texas. So we feel that this really does help kind of set us apart a little bit and put us on the map for students who maybe haven't heard a whole lot about Iowa State or hadn't really been considering us seriously, because they might not really know what there is to know about, being a student and being at Iowa State. So, being a school that is not as, globally in a state that's not globally recognized, we feel that this can make a big difference. And I did hear, verbal confirmation from students at events. I had a student who told me, I really wasn't even considering Iowa State. And he messaged me earlier this week and said that he had accepted his offer. So, that student's decision, this, had definitely made a big impact on that. The photo you see here, this particular event was in Tashkent in Uzbekistan. We were able to host this one at the US Embassy. We don't always do it at the US Embassy, but because this was kind of our first time actually engaging with this market, we did want to connect with Education USA, and they had suggested that we could host it at the embassy. So these students actually got to meet with the ambassador, the US ambassador, who came and spoke to them, which was a really, really cool and memorable experience for them. I think that this strategy is especially useful for institutions who have concerns about markets where you have a large number of applications and admitted students, but maybe you're worried about visa denial rates. This was definitely the case in Uzbekistan. All of these students were concerned about getting their visa approved, and they're going to have a very different story to tell during that visa interview because of this experience that they were able to have with Iowa State in their hometown. So especially those countries where you have a large number of students, but you tend to not be able to yield them, whether it be for visa or just, regular competition, it can be beneficial for, both types of circumstances. While we were there, I have one more thing I want to touch on. While we were there, we introduced our I'm a Cyclone campaign. So this was a social media campaign that we were running. We gave the students t-shirts, which you can see a few of the students did put them on for the photo. So we passed out swag. They all got t-shirts who, came to the admitted student tour. And then we invited them to participate in our social media campaign, posting a fun photo with their t-shirt on. So that was kind of a fun way to get them a little bit excited about, being a Cyclone and coming to study at Iowa State. We did see almost 100% turnout at most of the in-person yield events that we hosted. So it's looking at the, first, we had students register for the events in advance. And then of the students who registered, we saw almost 100% turnout. In Uzbekistan, we had 100% turnout for the event. So they were, very highly successful in most cities that we ran these in. We do have, because this is a newer strategy, we're being very intentional about tracking, the students who attend these events and, waiting to see if they make it to our campus. So we've hosted in-person yield events in our biggest, couple markets for several years. But this was really kind of the first time where we expanded it to the scale where we're going to so many different countries and so many different cities. So that was an important part of, the process, is to make sure that we're implementing a process that we can track and, really see how successful these events are in terms of our enrollments. I think that's everything I wanted to touch on this one. Obviously we're not able to make it to every city in every country in the world. So we do want to make sure that we're offering virtual opportunities for students to connect with us. So we do have an admitted student event that we do via Zoom, where we're kind of sharing the same information and inviting students to participate in our social media campaign. However, we weren't able to give them their t-shirts. We'll give them to them when they get to campus in the fall. We're doing some student panels as well, so they can connect directly with some current Iowa State international students. They can also use the Unibuddy platform. So I know probably a lot of institutions on this call do already use Unibuddy, but in case you do not, it's a chat platform where students can download an app and basically text with an admissions officer or with a current student to have kind of more of that one-on-one communication and get a little bit more information from the student perspective. So we have a variety of students on our Unibuddy platform from different countries. This is an example of what one of those profiles looks like. So Catalina is from Chile. She's doing her bachelor's degree in marketing, and then she has kind of a little introduction so students can see, what kinds of things they might have in common with the student. We do offer one-on-one consultations as well. They can either connect with us directly as admissions officers, or if we know that, something super nitty-gritty in the academic plan is going to be a big difference maker for them, we will reach out to some of our college partners and have them connect with an academic advisor. We've even had faculty volunteer to meet with admitted or even prospective students sometimes to provide a little bit more information about the specific program that the student is applying to that maybe we as admissions officers cannot speak to some of the technical language, for example. So we find that the virtual opportunities, even though we focus so heavily on the in-person experience, we definitely don't want to neglect the virtual experience as well. In terms of communication, so we started offering automatic scholarships this past year, which we previously did not have for our international students. So students are being notified, those students who do qualify for the automatic scholarships are being notified much earlier in the admission process that they have, received a scholarship to the university. So they're not having to wait for the scholarship deadline. And they can kind of get, moving through their process a little bit earlier because they have that scholarship decision in their hand. I think that now that we've seen for the US anyway, students are, going to be able to apply for their visa up to a year in advance now of their anticipated start date. I think that this is going to be even more important that they have that scholarship decision earlier. So we, are hopeful that this is something that we can continue to offer because students will definitely be able to jumpstart on that visa process much earlier, knowing what their financial situation is going to be. So this has, been part of the admission process, but it definitely is very relevant to yielding your students as well, as, your scholarship offers that you have and the timing of those offers as well. We, of course, do email and WhatsApp campaigns, as I'm sure many other institutions do as well. Typically, we're trying to communicate things like important dates or deadlines or events. So we did do a WhatsApp campaign for our in-person yield event, for example, and we messaged the students from the particular city that we were going to let them know, hey, you should have received the invitation, make sure that you register for this event. I will add with this, we did actually run into a bit of a hiccup with one of our WhatsApp campaigns. A colleague of mine, someone on our staff actually had their WhatsApp account suspended for a period of time. We think that one of the students may have reported the account as like spam or something. So I would recommend if you're doing WhatsApp campaigns to, kind of proceed with caution and try to make your WhatsApp account appear as legitimate as possible. WhatsApp does have, many things that you can add to your WhatsApp profile. You can add the institution logo, the website. You can even upload brochures. So make sure that that WhatsApp account is appearing to be very professional, and make sure you're using WhatsApp Business as well and not just the regular WhatsApp. So we did have to adapt our campaigns a little bit because we had run into that issue. So hopefully nobody else has that experience. That was definitely a first for us. We do have a next step packet that is sent out to students, where they have more information about the visa process, registering for housing. So there's a very clear checklist that they're able to follow. And then over the summer, students will take an online introduction to Iowa State course. They have to complete this course before they can register for their classes. So it just kind of, helps, again, prepare them for the process and keeps them engaged throughout the summer. They have steps that they need to complete, that they're continuing to engage with us and continuing to complete steps until they actually get to campus.
Good afternoon. As Emma mentioned earlier, my name is Lucas Gazelle. I'm the team lead of international admissions at Southern Alberta Institute of Technology. Today, I'm going to start by providing a little bit of information about SAIT that will provide some context for today's conversation. After that, we're going to kind of review some of the institutional changes as well as some of the admissions changes that have improved conversion here at SAIT over the last 30 years. And we'll end by looking at some of the outcomes of these changes and improvements. So to get us started, SAIT is located in Calgary, Alberta, Canada. We have approximately 17,000 full-time learners studying in apprenticeship, certificate, diploma, and undergraduate programs. We have more than 4,000 international students currently studying at SAIT from over 105 different countries. We are a tri-semester institution, so we have an academic intake starting every fall, winter, and spring. In 2021, SAIT released a new international growth strategy, which tasked us with increasing international student numbers from 2,800 all the way up to 6,000 by 2026. To support this new growth strategy, the International Center also went through a restructure. The focus of this restructure was to remove international student barriers and foster a customer-centric approach. Along with this restructure came some pretty significant institutional changes that further supported the growth mandate. So starting with the International Center at SAIT got its very own admissions team that focuses exclusively on processing international applications. By moving the team from the Office of the Registrar to the International Center, it also created a closer connection with the international recruitment team and the international admissions team, which made it so that we were better able to identify and act on demand opportunities. We also had IDP do some research for us to make sure that any new programs we were offering were in demand. We were able to increase our scholarship amounts from around 100,000 to just under $1 million. We also put some investments into marketing dollars and added international recruiters in key regions and started doing yearly familiarization tools. All SAIT staff and faculty were also provided intercultural training. Now, if these changes here are ones that partially, some came through the implementation of a new system. And I'm going to kind of just stop. The very first one is probably the one that I would say is most significant in improving our conversion. So in our old system, we did have a method for submitting 2 applications, but what happened is each application was a separate record and we weren't clearly able to identify which one was actually the second choice. So ultimately we were pretty much doubling our workload. With our new system, if the student selects their first choice program, and if it is full, we are able to offer them a seat in their second program, which ultimately retains them as a SAIT student. So by kind of having the clarity on what first and second choice was for the applicant, we're better able to kind of serve the applicant and make sure that they are attending SAIT. In the new system, we were able to utilize some automation and some AI. We also enhanced our program offerings. So we started off offering bundle certificates. We offered ELF plus academic program. So for those of you here in Canada, we know that the postgrad work permit, the 2-year study length is kind of gets the maximum postgrad work permit length, and that's typically what students are looking for. We shortened our deposit date. So we used to have a 8-week deposit deadline, and we reduced that all the way down to 3 weeks. As both Emma and Kimmy mentioned, we have really ramped up our proactive applicant outreach. So we kind of use that information that we gained from that outreach also to do a risk assessment and kind of do predictions on new starts for the start of each semester. We've completely redone how we do conditional offers. In our old state, we would pretty much give conditional offers to anyone that submitted an anticipated final grades. And with our new system now, you have to provide proof of either being registered or providing a test date before we'll release a conditional offer. And this is a big part that kind of helped us kind of streamline a lot of our work, because what was happening is everyone would submit an AFG, or an anticipated final grade. And then at the end of the semester, we would have to do a lot of follow-up work and reaching out to applicants again to kind of get those students finalized with their admission requirements. The next one we did was at SAIT, we used to have our applications open pretty much the entire length of the application cycle, but we have started to close our programs after they've hit the waitlist threshold. And so this is kind of twofold. It helps with being more transparent with the applicant, and it also reduces workload on the admissions officers, so they're able to focus on programs that still have seats available to fill. And then we also made a clearer and less cluttered deferral policy. So in the past, we would have the admissions team kind of vetting deferrals, and we've kind of made it clear, and every student is eligible to defer their application one time for whatever reason they deem fit, and we don't ask for any proof or any evidence that as long as they haven't deferred before, we'll accommodate them. When we set up the international admissions team, these are kind of a list of the KPIs that we set up as a team. So starting with the first one there, which is an automated comms piece, but the student receives an application acknowledgement within 24 hours of applying. Our second one was to reduce international cumulative offers to confirmed ratio. Qualified applicants receive an offer within 7 business days, and we use data-driven decisions to manage both the waitlist process and over offer process. All messages are responded to within 5 business days, and all applications are processed within 10 business days. And each admissions officer is required to do 75 document evaluations each week. So now I'm kind of going to look a little bit at the outcomes of some of these changes. And as I mentioned, a lot of these were institutional changes that required buy-in from senior leadership, and others were as a result of changes to process or admissions or application process. So in fall 2022, it was taking us an average of 28 days to send an offer out, and another 26 days to get the LOA, so the letter of acceptance. So for a total of 54 days. At that time, we were also sending out approximately just under 3 offers to get 1 confirmation. And I'm very proud to say for this fall, our timelines have drastically increased and almost reduced in half. So we're looking for this fall, we'd be looking at about 6 days for an offer, 14 days until an LOA, for a total of 20 days in total. And at this point, we're sending out about 1.4 offers to get 1 confirmation. And this here is kind of just switching a little bit to the outcomes, and it shows a little bit of our story over the last 3 years. So in fall 2022, we were sending out a whopping 5 offers to get at least to get 1 confirmation. And as I mentioned in the last slide, this fall, we're sending out 1.4 offers to get 1 confirmation. So we've made significant gains there by not only reducing the amount of offers that we're sending out, but to sending the offers to more engaged students as well. This is kind of another slide here that I think really demonstrates our success over the last 3 years. At the same time as we've also been able to kind of reduce the cumulative offers, we've been able to reduce our melt rate from 45% to 37% this fall. This winter, we even had a melt rate of minus 33%, which was the lowest we've achieved yet. And I think this further showcases the positive impacts of these changes. As I mentioned earlier, our International Center is a customer-centric center, and the efficiencies gained and have created a better experience for our applicants and students. I'm sure everybody in the room here would agree that getting an offer out in 6 days is much better than getting it out in 28 days.
All right. Thank you so much, Lucas and Kimmy, for sharing those insights. Sounds like you've got some really great stuff going on at Iowa State and at State. And so at this time, we're going to open it up for questions. I see we do have a few already coming in, and please continue to go ahead and ask those questions using the Q&A tool in Zoom. And so starting off with our first question is any idea of yield rates at the graduate level? So I'll share for the IDP data, for both US and Canada, the graduate yield rate was 27%. So it was pretty much the average. So I didn't really pull that out there, but I don't know if you have that information for your institutions, Lucas or Kimmy.
So at State, we don't actually have any graduate level programs. We have undergraduate programs, but no graduate programs are offered.
Yeah, we do have graduate level programs, but unfortunately, because the admission process is more managed by the department and not the central office of admissions, I don't have any really data to share on that.
Yeah, thanks. That is very tricky managing the graduate levels because typically it tends to be quite decentralized. And that rolls right into our next question, which might be a little tough to answer, but any advice on managing graduate time to decision yield? Relying on faculty committees to turn around is always a struggle for us. So Kimmy, I don't know if you have any thoughts on that.
Sorry, can you repeat which one you were looking at?
Yeah, no problem. So talking about managing decision times at the graduate level, basically, and working with different faculty committees.
Yeah, I mean, usually we really are very decentralized. So they really kind of set their own timeline, and it really depends on the program, how long the decision might take. We are just kind of starting to have a little bit more integration between the admissions office and the graduate department. So I think that's something that we'll probably be a little bit more versed in the future. But at this time, I really just, yeah, we're just not really involved with the graduate level process. But we generally assist students with the application, but once they have that application submitted, it is done fully by the department.
Great, thank you. All right, so next question is for you again, Kimmy. Would love to hear more about the effectiveness of Unibuddy and ROI.
Yeah, I think it's been pretty successful. I get messages all the time from our ambassadors that we have on there. Hey, I have a student asking about this, about that. And students that I have been chatting with through the Unibuddy system myself, I have met on campus. So we really implemented Unibuddy, I think more so on the domestic side. That was kind of our agreement, I think was actually more for the domestic students. And then they kind of just added international. So we've been able to benefit quite a bit from that. I'm sure our international team, or I'm sure our domestic team has some really great data on the ROI, and that's why we did end up adding the international. So yeah, I think it's been successful, but I don't necessarily have percentages and things like that to share with you.
Thanks, Kimmy. All right, so jumping down to a question for you, Lucas. Amazing results at SAFE to get the whole recruitment, marketing, and recruitment teams on the same page. How much of this was down to internal decisions or external partners?
So I think it was probably a little bit of both. I think a few of the, like, obviously the decision to combine the two was implemented by feedback as well from stakeholders. So I think there was obviously some advantages that the leadership team saw in combining the two areas and transitioning that function over to the International Center. But I think it was a lot of feedback from stakeholders, just, you know, explaining kind of like saying that like international students meet offers much quicker than domestic students, because here at SAFE we believe it, and I'm sure most people on the call would agree that the offer is the #1 step to conversion. So the quicker we can get that offer out the door, the greater the chance that the student shows up on the first day of class. So I'd say it's a combination of both, based on feedback by external partners.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you. It is very impressive what you guys have done, and you can see that in your results. All right, so jumping back to a question for Kimmy, could you speak more about the WhatsApp campaign? Do you use it for any purposes besides in-person events?
We do. So if there's, you know, specific deadlines coming up that students should be aware of, if the housing contract, I think last year we did one for the housing contract when it opened. This year we were at the timing of it just overlapped a lot with the in-person yield. So we focused our campaigns more on the in-person events this year. But yeah, we've done it, you know, hey, you can start your housing contract. You know, hey, scholarship deadline is coming up. What else have we done it for? Yeah, so a lot of times it's communicating deadlines, or if there's a virtual event, right? Our virtual, you know, student panel or virtual, you know, admitted student event, we can do a WhatsApp campaign for those, and we have in the past. So yes, we promote both virtual opportunities and the in-person ones.
Great, thank you. All right, I believe this is another question for Kimmy. Can you repeat what you included in those next steps packets?
Yeah, so the next step packet is basically just walking a student through everything that needs to be completed before they arrive to campus. So, you know, hey, if you haven't created your Iowa State email yet, here's how to do it. Make sure you do the online Introduction to Iowa State course, which walks them through how to make their advising appointment. So, you know, then another, you know, next step is going to be to complete that advising appointment. You know, send flight information, you know, to get your, you know, shuttle from the airport to the campus. So basically all of those little nitty gritty things that, you know, students will have to do that, you know, you can forget about, like, oh yeah, I need a shuttle to bring me to campus. That's all included in the next steps packet to make sure that, you know, nothing is really falling through the cracks. So there's a lot in the packet. It's quite long, actually.
Yeah, that's such a good idea, because a lot of it just comes down to those practical details that needs to fall into place.
Yeah, I know we've talked about adding some things in the packet as well, like things that students should bring with them. So for example, if it's spring entry, we're in a pretty cold state, right? We want them to be prepared for the cold weather. So we've talked about adding some things in the packet, even to include what kinds of things they should bring with them, so they're prepared when they get to campus.
Sure.
And we email the packet. We do not physically mail it. It's by email, but it's a PDF, so they can like download it to their computer.
Great. Thanks, Kimmy. All right, so next question for you, Lucas. You mentioned state provides intercultural training to all employees. What kind of training do you provide and in what format? Is it mandatory or optional?
So the program we have here at state is it's a 6-week program, twice a week for an hour. The program was mandatory for all faculty here at state and was strongly recommended for any staff members. So I know on the international team, almost everybody, maybe some new people aside, have completed that training, and institutionally, I think we were close to having 75–80% of all staff members complete the intercultural competency training.
That's great. All right, so next question for both of you guys. What data sources do you primarily use? So I'll hand that off to Kimmy first.
So I guess when we're looking at our, when we're deciding maybe where we're going to go for our in-person yield events, we're looking at a lot of internal data. So usually we're going to return to the countries that we went to for recruitment. We're expecting if we went to that, country to recruit, we invested in that market, we want to see, that through the end. And then we also just look at the number of admitted students that we have from each country as well. So we're looking at our internal data. We're seeing we had a large number of students admitted from Uzbekistan, even though we had not previously traveled there to recruit. We did decide to go there for yield because that, data was showing us that we had a large population of students in Tashkent who had been admitted to Iowa State. So a lot of times when we're making decisions about our yield strategy and what markets we're going to travel to, especially for yield, we're looking at that internal data. I'm not sure if there's anything else you guys want me to touch on, but let me know.
No, that's great. Yeah, how about you, Lucas?
So here at state, we have Tableau that also gives us institutional data. So we use that. We rely on that pretty heavily, especially in figuring out how many over offers we should send out. We kind of look at historical numbers on Melt and then kind of work backwards from there, making sure that we hit that 100% fill rate by over offering a certain amount. So we do rely pretty heavily on historical institutional data. Recently, we've even got IDP to do research on us for in programs that are in demand. So kind of just making sure before we put those investment dollars into starting up new programs that they're viable and sought after by international students. And we also have a IDP portal that provides the study permit information. So there's kind of a few different insights that we get from that portal. It breaks down more specific regional processing times on the study permit and visa processing side. But yeah, for kind of mostly, I would say is the institutional data historical institutional data that we use.
Great, thank you. All right, our next question, again, this one is for both of you guys. Do you have any experience with conversion in Latin American countries? I have managed to increase significantly the number of applications in this admission cycle, but conversion is still extremely low. So Lucas, do you want to take that one?
Yeah, I think here at state, kind of Latin America is one we're just starting to kind of put some more recruitment dollars into. So I think I don't know, I have great tips on conversion from there. I've heard from the recruitment team that having local representation in the region really helped with conversion, but I don't have any numbers to actually back that up.
Or Kimmy, do you have any experience in Latin America?
Yeah, we did do, we haven't hosted in-person Guild events in Latin America except for Brazil. So Brazil is where I would have the most experience. And this was our second year doing a Guild event in Brazil. So we did do one last year and we did it again this year. Brazil is one of the countries where we didn't see quite as high of a number of students registering and attending our yield event. So that was one that we didn't see quite as high turnout. So I would say that that is probably a trend for many institutions if you're, seeing that as well. But we seem to have very high success with the students who did come to our yield event and for students who had received a scholarship as well. So having the financial support and also the, institutional one-on-one level support has seemed to have make a difference for Brazil at least.
Great, thank you. All right, so our next question is about the structure at your institutions. So how many admission officers at Iowa State and SAIT? And do these officers process international or domestic apps? So Lucas?
So at SAIT, my team focuses exclusively on international applicants, so we don't do anything with domestic applicants. And on the team, I have 6 admissions officers and 3 enrollment specialists.
Great, Kimmy?
Yeah, so our team is also specific to international, and we actually have separate teams for recruitment and processing. So on the recruitment side, we have 3 recruiters, so myself and 2 other individuals. So we focus only on recruitment. We do not review applications in our role. And then our processing team are the ones who review the applications and issue the, work on all the documents essentially. So I think they did, I think they have maybe 4 people on the processing side, including one that does like international, or graduate international.
Great, thank you. All right, next question is for Lucas. You mentioned using automation with your application and AI. Can you please expand on the use of AI? Very topical question.
Absolutely. So as I mentioned, we implemented a new application system in this past October. And within that system, some of the AI that we've already taken advantage of is passport authentication and validation. And we've also been able to utilize Duolingo and IELTS authentication and validation. So what that means is by the time the admissions officer reviews those applications, they don't have to confirm identity and they don't have to confirm English proficiency. So those are kind of two things that we utilized with the automation. So more or less by the time the admissions officer gets there, if there's a green check, it means they don't green asterisk by it. They don't have to verify that information manually. It's been done automatically through the system. And those were kind of, we have a developer that worked with us and then connected with IELTS and Duolingo to set up an API that validates that information. And now as we're progressing, we're kind of looking at phase 2 enhancements, which is we're in phase 2 right now. And one of the other kind of AI or I guess automations coming through that system is based on the document evaluation side. So what we're doing is we're kind of storing all of our I always say IDA, but I mean international document evaluation. All of the results are being stored into a database. So what happens is if you have another student apply from that same institution, it's going to show you the other applicants that had that grade level and what you awarded them. So instead of going and looking at conversions every single time, if you've done a conversion from that school before, you'd be able to reuse the information that you've already searched and verified the first time.
Wow, sounds like some nifty stuff going on. Thank you. All right, next question is, do you have a set number of touch points for each applicant for each admit and deposit? And roughly how much is over communication versus under? So I think there's questions about getting the balance of the right amount of communication, not spamming students. So Kimmy, any thoughts about that?
Yeah, this was actually an issue that we had a few years ago. One of our agents had actually, reached out to us and told us, hey, the students I'm working with are getting way too many emails from Iowa State. And they even sent us a screenshot of the inbox, and it was very, very dominant with Iowa State emails. So that was something that we changed with our email journey a few years ago to make sure that we were not spamming students, I guess. So yeah, I can definitely relate to that because and it was kind of more of those automated ones, right? So we did scale back on the automated, email journeys, but we probably, we kind of almost just replaced that with a more personal and more like WhatsApp. So we've moved away from the automated, so many automated, obviously there are still, there's still a journey in place, but we have moved more to WhatsApp when we are having more of that personal touch point with a student. I don't know that we necessarily have we do kind of, have a set number when a student is a prospect, we, send them an email. And so, yeah, I guess we do kind of have a set number of times where we are, checking in with that student and telling them, hey, I see you're interested in Iowa State, and that's not automated. We're doing that personally. So, and that has seemed to have a good balance for us.
Great, thanks, Kimmy. Lucas, any thoughts on that?
I think as Kimmy mentioned, we had a lot of very similar issues. I think, making sure a student doesn't get emailed 5 times that their fees are due. And I think, like Kimmy said, we've also really kind of dialed back a lot of our mass automated comms pieces just because they weren't effective. And I can even speak from my personal experience. If it's a more tailored email, that has my name specifically in the email, I'm more likely to respond than mass comms. So I think for us, we really typically try to ramp up our touch points closer to the start of the semester. So, we will call them and we'll ask if they have any issue or are having any issues that are stopping them from coming to Canada, if they need any help with their study permit. But it was something we battled with for quite a while because it was, different units across campus sending different messages, and then us also sending another reminder, and then us calling and following up again. So I think we kind of really dialed back on the automated comms and started kind of doing more tailored reaching out and having a conversation, seeing if there's anything that they're worried about, if there's anything that kind of creating that more and by doing that, we've also been able to use that then afterwards to create engagement scores and estimate new start numbers. So it's kind of dual serving. I know I'm going a little bit off the topic, but the touch points we use also to kind of estimate the number of new starts we'll have attending at SAIT. So not only are we helping them kind of make sure that they convert, we're also helping ourselves by giving faculty and schools information on how many new starts they can expect.
I would add too that, the touch points and maybe even the number of touch points with students can depend on the market, like where they're coming from. So when I'm looking at, I work quite a bit in the Middle East region and with our sponsored students, of course. And my communication with them looks very, very different if I'm talking to a student from Saudi Arabia versus a student from Turkey or from Tunisia, right? Because there's that scholarship program. I know, what kinds of things they might need and that they're, working with that sponsor as well. So my communication with them and the way that I touch base with them is very different. I probably communicate with the sponsored populations a little bit more frequently just because they, do have kind of some additional needs. So yeah, I think it varies depending on the market that you're interacting with.
Sure, great point. Yeah. All right. Thank you so much, everyone, for all your wonderful questions. I'm seeing a lot come in here, and I don't think we'll have time to get them all, unfortunately, but if you do have any burning questions outstanding, feel free to send us an email. We'll get a response for you. But we'll finish up with one more question here. I think this is an interesting one. What kind of questions or concerns do students at yield events have for you, and what brings them over the line? Lucas, any thoughts on that?
I think Kimmy kind of touched on one that we battle with all the time is the cold, right? So for example, we had some students showing up in September saying it's very cold, and I thought to myself, well, you haven't seen anything yet. Wait till January. So I think it's just kind of prepping them on what they need to know and what they need to be successful in Canada. I think kind of the common ones that I see. Mostly it's a lot about study permit concerns or delays. Sometimes it's about finding housing. Here in Calgary. We have quite a low vacancy rate, so that's a more common concern that's come up in the last few semesters, and will be a problem going forward as those numbers don't seem to be or that vacancy rate doesn't seem to be increasing. So I'd say housing, study permit, and those would be kind of probably the two main ones. The other one would be maybe program choice and tuition or funding questions.
Great, thank you, Lucas. Kimmy?
I'm so sorry. Can you repeat the question? I was responding to one in the beginning, like by writing. I'm trying to answer as many questions as we can before you finish.
Yeah, no, appreciate that. Yeah, so the question was about what are the sort of most popular questions you get from students at yield events and what brings them over the line?
Definitely safety. Safety is, one of the biggest topics that come up at my in-person yield events, especially with the US, right? Like they see gun violence all over the news, and, that's a really, big concern. So that's probably one of the biggest topics that is asked about by students. And again, this might be a little bit more specific to the US, but letting them know kind of that we're not in a big city, right? Like Iowa State, tends to be pretty safe. Obviously, nothing is bulletproof. Nothing is, you can never make a guarantee that there's not, never going to be an incident, right? But just explaining a little bit about what the community is like and the overall population. We are a smaller town, right? So with less people, there's less guns. And, putting into perspective a little bit too, like when I was in Pakistan actually, and this was a huge conversation there. And I told him, I was like, it's really funny that this is a big topic for you guys, because when I'm coming here, like my family is asking me the same thing. They're like, what? You're going to Pakistan? Like, they're worried about my safety because of what they see on the news. And so it kind of goes both ways, right? Like they're seeing it so much on the news that it's, very, very built up in their head. So sometimes I'm able to kind of relate a little bit to that, or convey like, hey, that this is, something that just tends to be inflated a lot on the news. So, and they seem to appreciate that example, I guess. So.
Yeah, great point. All right, well, we are at time. So we weren't able to get to all the questions. So apologies if we didn't get to yours, but thank you so much for sending in so many wonderful questions. And like I said, if you have a burning question, send us an email. We'll be happy to get your response. And I want to give a big thank you to Kimmy and Lucas for joining today and for sharing all your wonderful insights. It seems like the audience has really enjoyed it. And so the webinar recording and slides will be sent to you in a follow-up email, so keep an eye out for that. There is also a brief survey that will pop up at the end of the webinar. We'd love if you could take a moment to fill that out. We really do value your feedback, and it helps us develop our future content. And also want to give a quick plug for our next webinar on our brand new Emerging Futures 3 data. So we're having 2 webinars next week, one for Canada and one for the US. So keep an eye out for those, and we hope to see you there. And thank you all again so much for joining, and have a wonderful day. Thank you.